Being charged with the murder of his children, even though that's not what this affidavit says. He is being charged with the murder of his children, even though that's not what this affidavit says.
Maybe she took her life and the girls. Maybe it was a murder-suicide that way. That's what I was, like, that was my worst case scenario. That was like the worst case scenario in my head.
And I go back in my mind thinking, I can't think of anything except he was quiet. How does this happen? How did this happen?
Content warning. The ensuing content is intended for educational and documentary purposes only and may contain material that some viewers could find disturbing. Viewer discretion is strongly advised.
Your son wants to talk to you before he tells us anything. And that's when Christopher broke down and cried and said, "I'm sorry, Dad." He said, "I went into a rage and I killed her after she killed Cece and Bella."
Breaking this hour, the man accused of murdering his pregnant wife and their 2 young children told police that his wife was strangling the kids, causing him to go into a rage.
This arrest affidavit shows us the story Chris Watts told police.
Chris Watts blames his late wife.
Christopher Watts' story. He is claiming that his wife killed their 2 little girls, and then he killed his wife in a rage. A story that the prosecution doesn't seem to be buying. He walked downstairs for a moment and then returned to his bedroom to speak with Shanann again. While in the bedroom, via the baby monitor located on Shanann's nightstand, he observed Bella sprawled out on her bed and blue, and Shanann actively strangling Celeste. Chris said he went into a rage and ultimately strangled Shanann to death. Chris says he loaded all 3 bodies onto the back seat of his work truck and took them to an oil work site identified by these coordinates. 9 counts, felony counts, and he is being charged with the murder of his children, even though that's not what this affidavit said.
Are there any warning signs?
No, none at all.
So that makes sense. That's why I know you guys keep asking these questions. It doesn't make sense to me.
The first reporter to ask Watts' parents their thoughts on his potential life sentence and what they believe really happened to Shanann, Bella, and Celeste.
How did he kill her? How did he say he did it when he snapped?
He said he did the same thing that she did to him, that she did to the girls.
His parents went into details about the relationship problems Shanann and Chris allegedly had, but more importantly, spoke about the frustrations with his whole plea.
Are you guys frustrated with his attorneys here? Are you guys frustrated with the direction they may have put him through?
Yes, I am. I am absolutely frustrated.
We contacted his public defender, but they declined to comment.
Do you guys think he was coerced at all?
I don't know. I don't know. I have no idea what the public, to me, that all they wanted to do was just save his life. Just save his life. Well, save his life and life in prison, to me, there's no difference.
But there's been some reaction about all this from Shanann's family.
Are you guys worried about some of the backlash about maybe coming out and speaking on behalf of Chris and what it might do to your guys' relationship and, speaking out like this about a woman who can't defend herself right now?
Well, Shanann, I mean, you have to get to know her to be around her. Put it that way.
The Watts family story stands as a dark chapter marked by devastating betrayal. Far from the sole act of villainy under the cover of night, this narrative unfolds into a deeply tragic and complex saga. People are going to get super miffed.
Start thinking about, movie type stuff.
But you went through a lot of scenarios of which her being murdered by her husband was not one of them.
No, yeah, absolutely. Like that. And then one that even went through my head at some point was maybe their problems were really bad and maybe she took her life and the girls. Maybe it was a murder-suicide that way. That was like the worst case scenario in my head. Like maybe they had such a bad fight and there was going to be a custody and she was pregnant, she was stressed out, she just couldn't handle it anymore. Like that was my worst case scenario.
Which is what's so interesting to me because obviously we know the outcome of the story.
But that monster who you thought was solely responsible and those 2 cute little girls who you thought had the most beautiful life until they were betrayed one time in the middle of the night in the middle of nowhere, for little Miss Nobody, not so fast. The Watts crimes weren't just one night, one ill-fated, tragic night. It was a series. It was years of complex abuse, teetering on the edge of sadism.
Do you know about their marriage and their issues?
Oh, very little. Very little. You can only observe. I could only observe what I saw when I was around them. Christopher always seemed anxious, and he when she needed something, I mean, he would run. He wouldn't walk, he would run, he would get it. He just always seemed to be right there at her beck and call.
And did that seem odd to you? Or?
Very odd. It was very odd. He just seemed nervous.
So how much did you see them over these last 6 years?
Probably twice a year. We would go up there.
Did you stay with them? Or?
Yeah, we would stay with them. And stay a week and then come back home.
This role was exploited naturally by his new wife and his new home. She used it often to paint a public image of their relationship, and it was far from reality.
Connect the two things that happened. So, for instance, health challenges. Chris, Mandy, life, right? I can write that help. I can connect that life health challenge to Mandy. I can connect it to Chris, and I can connect it to everything else that happened because of my health challenges. We may not understand it at the time. It's hard to understand it at the time. I'm telling you, when I met Chris, I pushed him away. I gave every excuse for him to run. I mean, I gave him an out every single day. I gave him an out. And if you guys know my story with Chris, you know I gave him an out. I mean, he went to my colonoscopy. I tortured him. I rejected him. I pushed him away time and time and time again. But when I canceled dates last minute, because that's how life is with my health challenges, you cancel things last minute, and it's hard for people to get. It's hard for me to understand. But he stuck around, and he stuck around because he was the one for me, and he is amazing.
Chris loves Shanann.
Oh, God, he loved her. Yes, I believe he loved her at first. I believe he did. But I think as the years went on, I think it just being in that kind of a relationship, which the social worker even said that marriage should have ended a long time ago. And he said that they have been talking about divorce, that they are not compatible anymore.
His mom, Cindy, were fighting again because Cindy had called me and told me that they had started fighting again. And I kind of was a little upset with Chris because I text Chris and just let him know, like, hey, man, this just got to stop. Like, I'm tired of hearing this. And he reached back to me and said he understood, he knew what was going on, and he kind of clued me in on him and Shanann are going to separate and get a divorce. And then that's when I told him, like, well, I'm here if you need to talk, man. And he said he would reach out to me some more, but he never really did after that.
Okay. What were Shanann and Cindy fighting about?
She said that, and this is coming from Cindy, that Cece had a food allergy to chocolate. And I guess Cece ate a whole bowl of Hershey Kisses, and Shanann came into the living room and was just yelling at Cindy and, telling her she's trying to kill her baby or something like that because of the food allergy. And Cindy had no idea, and she claimed she had no idea about it. And they had this huge argument, and she ended up kicking Shanann out of the house, telling her, to leave. And then shortly after that, Cindy called me crying and afraid because she was afraid she had just lost Chris, that, Shanann was going to, turn Chris against her, like what has happened in the past. And
Okay.
So she had called me crying and just letting me know, and that's when I just text Chris like, "Hey man, like what's going on, dude?" And yeah.
Okay. You said that had Shanann's turned Chris against Cindy. What can you tell me about that?
Yeah. So right around the time when they were engaged, I believe, Chris and Shanann were engaged. This huge fight between Cindy, Jamie, and Shanann was taking place, and they all felt like Shanann was trying to turn Chris against the family. And for a little bit there, Chris was on Shanann's side, not really defending his family. But I guess over the course of a year or two, they ended up passing things up, and they finally made amends, and they had back to a talking relationship again. And then this happened, and so it was like we're basically going back to square one.
Gotcha.
Tell me what happened when they were reported missing.
I thought, I don't believe it. I didn't believe they were missing. I believe that she was going to punish Chris. She was just going to punish him, take the girls, and just punish him. I had no idea of anything else. Christopher called and said, Mom, they're searching the house. I said, okay, that's fine. I mean, and I still was not worried. I was not worried. I just thought Shanann had run off with girls.
So walk me through the sequence of events over the next few days.
I thought she has just gone off and I'm going to punish you for this. Punish you for this and you can worry about it.
The Chris not murdering his kids theme doesn't just die with his parents. It lives on in their friends who weren't a part of the cult. Any of the MLM culty friends are going to tell you it was all Chris, 10,000. But for many, the thought of Chris being violently involved in his family's newly missing status wasn't even on the radar, not even a thought. Even the Lindstroms, friends who had met the Watts upon their arrival to Colorado, they knew each other from work, and in fact, Jeremy happened to be a figure who had emerged as someone who had the character to highlight or confront truths that others might avoid, such as calling attention to the fact that Shanann had changed her name and that her parents actually called her Shannon. You can't just change your name. Your parents call you Shannon, you're Shannon, he said. This level of candor adds to the weight of their perspective. The Lindstroms shared other troubling details, such as Chris being required to meticulously clean the basement before being permitted to catch his flight. Chris had confided in colleagues, his boss, his parents, his high school friend Mark. Everyone seemed to know that the divorce was inevitable, including Shanann. He even mentioned to Mark feeling tempted by a woman at work, although he claimed he didn't share all the details. Mark reportedly responded with a story kind of discouraging infidelity and a story that Chris conveyed later that he wished he'd have heeded. He was open with his wife and others about his reluctance to seek counseling, or it was a pretty open narrative and dialogue that Chris didn't want counseling and he thought that it was a done deal. Many believe that whenever she returned home that weekend due to the impending divorce and betrayal, considering that she knew that Chris had probably just taken another woman out on a week that they couldn't particularly afford it, like most weeks, since they were heavily into the rush of bankruptcy. These types of broken home situations are dynamics that we 100% know contribute to family annihilations and filicide. Mark, I suppose, feeling brave since Chris had let him know that basically him and Shanann were finished. He conveyed to Chris something that he had obviously been keeping inside of him, a tiny little secret, or a huge little secret, big little secret. Whatever contradicting descriptor you want, insert here. Much as Mark had inserted the fact that Shanann was the one who had embezzled from her previous job, and he suggested that she avoided the consequences because her involvement couldn't be conclusively proven. Chris Watts seemed naturally inclined to the role of caregiver, or at least perpetuating that role anyway.
And I can't tell you how wonderful he is. But on top of all of that, when I got sick, I reached out to support groups online, and I built relationships with so many so many people that have similar health challenges or the same, and we've built a relationship stronger than some of the relationships I've known for over 20 years, some of them that I've known over my whole life. And these people are in my life for a reason.
Many knew that Shanann Watts' approach to her children's health was a bit concerning. Her actions largely overlooked and even praised online. She was seemingly the dedicated mother and the picturesque example of motherhood. Disturbingly, she shared images on Facebook showing her infant swaddled excessively with blankets and pillows, and even with blankets tied as ligatures around their necks. Some would say to the point that any rational person would contemplate that she had some type of fixation with asphyxiation. And many of her children's alleged symptoms were of the respiratory variety, with undercurrents of stomach issues.
What's wrong?
I have a tummy ache.
Oh, you have a tummy ache now? What else?
My eyes hurt.
Your eyes hurt? And what else?
I'm dizzy.
You're dizzy? Well, you're awfully happy to be dizzy.
My fingers.
Okay, got it on. What else, Dr. Bella?
Oops. Sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Or a nurse?
I want to be a doctor.
You want to be a doctor? Why would you like to be a doctor?
Because
What does a doctor do?
check everyone.
Checks everyone and makes them feel better? Yeah?
Because I know what you went through.
Okay, guys. So, I'm trying to get organized here. Don't mind me. I'm a hot mess today.
Fibromyalgia, so she had a lot of body pain.
She has migraines a lot.
Migraines.
Before they had Bella, she mentioned that the doctor said she'd never even be able to have kids.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. She had those problems. But I know that her
She's always been a little weird to me by way of
health issues.
Yeah.
And the girls have health issues too. Which is it? I mean,
Well, and she calls herself Shanann, but her mom calls her Shannon.
Oh, okay.
So she's got a little bit of a rebellious. That's
Okay.
her name. It's Shanann.
Maybe I just old-fashioned. This almost seems like this place is a little bit too immaculate to be normal.
It's amazingly clean.
Do you know what I'm saying, though?
I do.
Prior to her leaving to come to North Carolina, and it may have progressed into something else when she was gone. I don't know anything about it. Chris didn't talk to us a lot about any of his personal life. He didn't, but you could see it. You could see it when you went down, when you went to visit.
When his family went missing and it was everywhere on the news, Kessinger says she realized he'd been lying to her, and she called the Weld County Sheriff's Office the day he was arrested. She's one of the people listed on the prosecution's witness list. I just wanted to help, she said. With a pregnant woman and 2 children missing, I was going to do anything that I could. Watts has reached a plea deal admitting that he's murdered his family, and he's set to be sentenced to life in prison on Monday. And if you're hoping that she knows why Watts did it, she says, I don't think there is a logical explanation. We mentioned that she spoke to our partners at the Denver Post. Tonight we have an early look at what the front page of tomorrow's Denver Post is going to look like. This story is front and center. You can read more of this interview. We have a link to this story posted at thedenverchannel.com.
Boy, still so much out there. Incredible.
So he never really gave specifics about what he saw or the reason he was wanting to separate.
He did not. I was basically letting him know about the conversation that I had with his mother, just cluing him in on what his mom was saying about Shanann, and he was not really confirming it, but confirming it that, yeah, I've seen that part of Shanann, but he never said exactly what he saw. He just said, I've seen that side of her, I've seen the true side of her, and I'm done.
Okay.
Okay.
Shanann Watts expresses her concern to the Mediterranean Familial Fever Facebook social group. I don't think my daughter's doctors believe me. She normally doesn't run a fever in their office, but she gets up to 100.7 to 100 and 1.5 degrees most days. Do you mind if I pick your brain? We haven't had a diagnosis yet, but they have me documenting for 2 months, then more testing. Shanann Watts communicates further. They won't put her on anything yet, which is frustrating. They want to rule everything else out first. She has one indication for FMF. If everything comes back negative, they're going to put her on it and try from there. I guess it's been a long road, to say the least. Shanann Watts expresses her worries and challenges regarding her daughter's health condition, stating, "So I feel like we are at square one. My daughter had DNA tested for periodic fever syndrome. It came back with one mutation for it. We are set up to see a genetic counselor to talk about more testing. I don't mind doing tests, but these are not cheap tests. I feel like they don't have a game plan. My daughter is 2 years old and only runs a consistent fever almost every day. Currently, no other symptoms that I know about." In another post, she writes, quote, "I'm new with FNF. We haven't been diagnosed yet, but that's what they are leaning towards. Do you mind if I ask how you found out your 2-year-old had it?" Symptoms: "My daughter is 21 months old." End quote. 4 months after her last interaction with the group, Shanann Watts seeks further insights, writing, quote, "So I have a question for you guys. My 2 girls are still not 100% diagnosed, but they are leaning towards FMF. My 2-year-old little one is now voicing more of what is bothering her. My question is, she overheats quickly in even just warm temperatures and freezes in cooler temperatures. It is like her body temp doesn't regulate properly. She shuts down and looks sick when she is too cold or too hot. Is this a part of FMF, or is this different? They just checked her thyroid, and they said it looks normal. Thanks in advance." End quote. Another user responds, quote, "Yes, for my girl." End quote. Shortly after, Shanann Watts shares, quote, "So it's FMF. I feel so bad for her when we do anything outside. Freezes at pool, playing soccer outdoors in May was a struggle." End quote. Neither of Shanann Watts' children were ever diagnosed with this disorder. It appears she was seeking information on symptoms, a common approach among caregivers in groups for specific health issues. Shanann Watts and her family's emphasis on their Italian heritage, particularly in referencing Italian tempers, reflects a problematic reliance on cultural stereotypes. Despite all of her grandparents being American, and most of them not of Italian descent. This approach not only perpetuates negative stereotypes, but also ties into her exploration of specific diagnoses, such as familial Mediterranean fever, FMF, in a way that might conflate cultural identity with medical conditions. This conflation of cultural stereotypes with health concerns underscores a complex interplay between cultural identity, health narratives, and the search for belonging or explanation within medical frameworks.
Not only their food, but their liquid was strongly controlled and led to some abnormal behaviors that also were posted on social media, such as Celeste drinking from the toilet. And the family's life was just simply marred with medical visits and oversharing, and even the identification of baby Cece as the ER kid. Shanann seeks out doctors and posts about it online until she found those who would support her views, and then she would proudly post photos of the children with new breathing machines and don a sigh of relief, claiming that finally she was going to get ahead of the illness. Cece, before she even reached the age of 1, had been through 3 exploratory surgeries. These surgeries were the result of her mother complaining that she had had esophageal issues. They underwent constant allergy testing.
Celeste also underwent multiple exploratory surgeries for her tear ducts because they were getting clogged. This situation raises concerns, particularly in light of the possibility that her needs and the underlying reasons for her distress and possibly complications of neglect, lengthy crying for excessive hours with no comfort or relief,